Is Jen Henderson, who is a senior software engineering manager at Capital One.
Hi. Did she grab your other microphone? Oh, there it is. Excuse me. Pardon me, excuse me. I get really used to that around here. Hi. So I'm going to be talking about data-driven development. I am a senior software engineer or software manager at Capital One. And then that sounds really boring because it's a big old bank and it's our credit cards and that kind of stuff. But actually, we're one of the first financial institutions to really go all in on the cloud, and we work with Amazon in order to actually get regulators to allow us to do that. So we're all microservices, we're all in the cloud, we are doing really, really cutting edge stuff, and I convince people of that all the time. We have no clicker, and I don't like yelling click, so this is my click. Thank you. So I'm going to tell you a story of two different people. So this is our product owner. Many of you are from Agile, you understand what a product owner is. Product owner sometimes has multiple personality disorder because they are representing the business, they are representing the customer, they are representing thousands of stakeholders, and then they are the single point of contact to try to melt all those minds into a single idea of what we're actually going to build for those people. So a little history. Cowboy programming. Those were the good old days. I've been professionally paid to do software development for 30 years. And back then, you had a desktop and a floppy disk, if you were lucky. And you would do some programming and you would put it out, and essentially if it broke, it broke. If it worked, you did your job for the day, you did really good. That was the entire job. And that's where you get sort of that current mythos of the amazing individual programmer that we have today that we are currently fighting, because guess what? Now software development is a group activity, not individual toys for little boys. Next. So things break. And this is the problem. If it worked fine for me, I was a developer, I was using it, so what if it doesn't work in my actual customers? So, remember, one of the things you have to look at is whether you are looking at a monolith or you're looking at a new, modern, Kubernetes-based API structure with microservices. Things get more complicated. They just get more complicated. Otherwise, you're not actually adding additional functionality or value to the business. Okay, so once something breaks, you gotta fix it. Okay? And that's the way that we used to work. What we would do is we would just put it out there, we would wait till our customers use it, we would watch it break, and then we go, okay, I can fix that. And we put the highest screamers at the top, and all the little ones at the bottom, and then we would go ahead and continue to move forward with our work. So, essentially what happens is at the end of the day, you end up with the world's largest Jenga tower. You're constantly moving things around. You're not quite sure when you're going to pull out that one block that is going to knock down the whole thing, and sometimes it's easier to program when you're drunk. So what we did was, to try to fix this, is we started manual testing. We would take our application, we would give it to a bunch of people, and we would say, you pretend to be the customer and actually make sure that this works. So unless you have a room of 1,000 monkeys to bang on software all day long, that was sort of a stopgap measure. I will tell you, for a great deal of our industry, it is still the standard, and that's actually kind of sad. Because it's really grueling work, doing the same scripts over and over and over and over and over and over again. You start missing things, it's just a really, really tough job, and it's not well sung. So we started doing automated testing, and this is where we take a tool, like if you're a Java programmer, you might use JUnit or something similar, and you actually start building up tests around your piece of software. So I write my software, I create a test, that way if something of that portion of that functionality in the future were to break, I'll know about it because this test will fail. But what are we actually testing? And that's one of the issues here, is that, going back to the cowboy programming, the developers were deciding what they were testing. And this is the way developers think. Used to. At least I hope to God. I'm a genius, or you wouldn't be paying me all this money. I wrote the software. It must be perfect. And therefore, I'm going to wrap the least amount of tests around these things because I want to get on to the next function. I want to build stuff. I don't really want to test stuff. And because I'm a genius, I know this really won't break, but you know, there's that scan that looks at code coverage and all that crap. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a bunch of tests over all this and call it the end of the day. I'm skeptical. Because the issue is, and we found this, the more users you have of your software, the more ways that they use your software in ways that you had not intended. Anybody go to the YouTube talk? I didn't write my software for pedophiles. Anyways, next. So we started doing what was called test-driven development, which is the opposite, where I go ahead and I write the test first, but then I write the software second. But you're like, wait, if you wrote the test first, wouldn't they break? Yes, that's the whole point. We had what was called the Christmas tree. So the Christmas tree was, every test was a light bulb on the Christmas tree. If it was broken, it was red. If it was good, it was green. We'd run the software, build the software, the tests would run, and if we had all green lights, happy days. Yay! We really like that. And that way, if you break one little thing over here while you're messing around over here, and anybody who's done a thing of lights during Christmas where you pull the one bulb and you can't figure out which is which, you know what I'm talking about, that'll happen. This was also fun when we started doing this because we, in at least one of my companies, we had a dunce hat, and we would put it on the person who broke the bill. And they had to wear it the rest of the day. So before they put their code into code, they tested it really, really well. So that was really good. So test-driven development, and quite frankly, right now, I would say in the industry, it's about 50-50. People are doing test-driven development. I really do like it. I like the idea of, give me my test, tell me what I have to program against. As soon as I get green lights, I know I'm done. There's not gold plating where I'm going to write a whole bunch of extra code because I think you kind of might want to sort of want this. Instead, it really does make really thin, usable code because it's just to the test. So, what happens though is, I've got these tests. We now did them ahead of time, but it's still the question is, did I write the exact tests that I really needed? And where should those tests come from? Well, some of them are for me because they're around performance or they're around things that are in the back end plumbing that, quite frankly, my product owner, we remember at the beginning of the slide presentation, does not care about. All that person cares about is, can one of our banking customers deposit a check? Can they get cash out of an ATM? You know, how do we process a loan? That's what they care about. They don't really care about the nooks and crannies and Kubernetes and the APIs and all the gobbledygook that none of them really want to understand at this point. So, what happens is you have a product owner, and the product owner comes to you and says, I have all these needs, all this functionality, and currently what you would do is under Agile, you would say, great, let's go ahead and break down that functionality into user stories. And there are books and books and books and books and books and books and books written on how to write good user stories. How to make them small enough so that they can be done within a sprint, how to make sure that they're telling people exactly what they want. But I will tell you, at the end of the day, they're really hard to write because they are simply a story. And a story is dependent not only on the storyteller, but also on the person interpreting the story. So, they sit down and they tell you your story, you go ahead and you program against it, you go ahead and you write your tests first, you do the programming, you get it back to them, and they go, that's great, that's what the story said, but that's not what I meant. And that happens all the time because it's really hard often for people to conceptualize in their mind, I know what I want, but I'm not quite sure how to tell you what I want. So, what you should do as a developer is go, what? And do it often. I don't understand. Could you repeat that another way? This doesn't make any sense. We need to find a different way of communicating. And one of the things that we're looking at is development by example, also known as behavior-driven development. You might have heard it over the years. It's been sort of banged around in the development community as specifications by example, example-driven development, agile acceptance testing, acceptance test-driven development. All these things roughly mean the same thing. What are you trying to solve, and can you give me examples of it? Welcome, Gherkin. So, Gherkin is a very simple language. It really is, where you give it and you say, show me some examples, and put it in this format, this super simple format. Formats that even product owners can write themselves. So essentially there's only 6 primary keywords in a Gherkin file, in a feature file in Gherkin, and then there's a few secondary keywords for putting in comments and tags and some other things. But it's extremely simple language. So I'm going to do an example with you guys of a feature file. This is the feature file for The Highlander, that great film from the 1980s. Who's seen it? Come on, I can't be the only one. Remember, there can be only one. And that's the rules that we have here. The feature for Highlander is rule. There can only be one. Background. Let's set up these scenarios. There are 3 immortals. Example, only one, more than one is alive. Given that there are more than one mortals alive, when 2 mortals meet, they will fight. And then 1 mortal dies, but not me. And there is 1 mortal left. Finally, another example. I am the only one alive. I will live forever. That is actually the plot of the movie. So you can see how I could go and I could do more and more examples. There's 5 immortals. They fight. Oh my God, they fought on holy ground. Oh, one lost his head. Queen showed up and had an amazing album. This is what this. You could add all this to this. And that's where we come to Cucumber. So this is a little backwards for me. And I also want to do one other side note here before I get onto this. You know how hard it is to find a meme about the word cucumber and have it be clean enough to do at a conference? That is really, really tough. So this is the best one I could find. But Cucumber is essentially an interpreter that reads Gherkin files and creates something for us. And that's where I found it backwards, because Gherkins come from cucumbers in the world, but we use Gherkin and we bring it back into a cucumber to get something else. Like I said, I hardly understand technical people after 30 years. Anyway, next. And this is actually, that file I showed you before, this is what comes out. And so this is actually in Ruby, but there's every language you can think of, except for my favorite languages, for some reason, Basic +2, Assembly, and Pascal. So if everybody wants to do an open source version, I'd really appreciate it. But this is Ruby. It was actually the first language that came up with the whole concept of Cucumber and Gherkin. And it's really simple. Given there are 3 mortals, do something. Given that there is 1 mortal alive, do something. There is 1 mortal alive, do something. It actually creates test code coverage automatically from the description that was given to you by your product owner. Interesting. So now I'm not just testing my code for what I thought it should do, I'm actually testing my code for what my product owner actually explained to me in this simple language that's good for my client. 100% test coverage. Your code is covered magically when you start doing this, especially if you're starting from a greenfield project. You don't have to worry, oh, did I get enough code coverage? Because you can't. You started with 100% code coverage. And you tricked your product owner into doing your work for you. It's awesome. If you say, I will not communicate with you unless you give me these files this way, because that way I can truly understand what you want, guess what? Now I just have to throw it through Cucumber and I get test coverage? Bingo! I won. Congratulations. And there's one other really bonus to this. Just like all of your files that you work on when you're working and you're putting it up into Git, or if you're in SVN or you're in another source control thing, what do you have? You have a history. You have the files that you've put in, have changed. You can look back. You can get a look at changes. Because this is sent to you in the form of an actual feature file, you now have complete documentation as to what you were trying to accomplish at any point in time with your code. Let me repeat that again. any point in time because I don't know about you, but I work for a bank and I work for healthcare companies, and there's this stinky little thing called an audit. And they want to know who asked you to do this programming, when was it done, when did it get out, who was using it, and I need to know this at all times. If it's hidden in layers of documentation in, say, a Confluence page, or, God forbid, a Word doc that you're handing around, or if you're in a little tiny company, sticky notes on the wall, you're going to fail your audit. If you do it this way, you can't fail the audit because I can say, product owner told me to build it to do this, here are the tests that went along with it, and it happened 3.5 years ago. That's the end of my presentation. I will be around for the conference. I'm kind of hard to miss. And I also have my contact information up here. If you have any questions around behavior-driven development or any of the other things that I tend to babble on about, I really would appreciate hearing from any of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Good, Mike. Great talk. That was superb.
Thank you
Good job.
so much.
That was awesome.